we have multi-international award-winning author Don Helin with us today. And we're going to be discussing his forthcoming novel, Twins. And another exciting point about today is we're revealing the cover for the first time. So Don, welcome to Zoom Into Books.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy. And I'm so glad so many of you were able to join me, particularly some longtime friends that I haven't talked to for a while. So it's always good to see longtime friends and people that I've known for a long, long time. Today, I really want to talk about plot lines and how they all fit together. And in way of bio, as many of you know, I was a career Army officer. I started out in Fort Carson, I went to Germany and Vietnam, and I ended up serving 3 tours, almost 10 years in the Pentagon. And believe it or not, I saw it all, the weapons systems, the personnel systems, and believe me, the politics. There's a lot of politics in the Pentagon, and it's kind of like a big vacuum cleaner. I was brought into the Pentagon, and it's like you leave, you go out and do something else, and all of a sudden you get a call, and you get pulled back again. And you finish there, and you go out, and you get another call, and you get pulled back. And that happened to me a total of 3 times. So it was almost 10 years that I ended up serving in the Pentagon. And of course, that really helped me. At the time, I didn't realize I would be writing suspense novels, but the experiences in the Pentagon, the people I met, the things I saw, the weapon systems have been invaluable as I've tried to create my various characters. But as always happens, it's time to move on. When I retired, I realized that there wasn't going to be a big demand for a guy who can write Army regulations in the civilian community. And we saw an ad in the paper for the Washington Post was having a travel writing symposium. And I thought, that'd be pretty interesting. And my wife, Elaine, said, well, we like to travel. Why don't you go and let's get paid for it? And it was so good. And it helped me so much. I became a travel writer, and I did that for almost 10 years. And I learned what I like to call creative nonfiction. And you know that when you're writing nonfiction, it can be kind of dull. And when you're writing fiction, you can create these stories. And what I learned is that in travel writing, there's 2 types. There's travel articles and travel brochures. A travel brochure is just the facts, when things open and all that sort of stuff. A travel article, what you're trying to do is bring your reader into that place so they can feel it and understand what's going on and be excited and want to come there. And that's using creative nonfiction, which is basically all of your senses and dialogue and all kinds of stuff. And I've been able to use that knowledge in creative nonfiction to write my novels and on to writing my memoirs. And then the things were going along really well. I had 6 novels, and all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And fortunately, Kathy and Headline Books staff developed the Zoom Into Books. So we were able to, for the last 2.5 years, to build up a community through Zoom Into Books. And over that 2 years, I was able to write 2 novels. I wrote my novel Missing, which is a story about a candidate who tries to use artificial intelligence to cook the books and win the presidential election. And that, of course, came out in the fall 2020, just in time for the presidential election, and did very well. And then we got going, because of the pandemic, through Zoom Into Books, we found a lot of interest in people that wanted to tell the story that was working for them, what they were doing. And so what we did is we had a series of Zooms to help people understand creative nonfiction, which is a skill that helps bring your story alive. And actually, Kathy put out a request for memoirs. And we got, I think, upwards close to 100. And we were able to publish an anthology of roughly 32 memoirs, which had people in healthcare, had writers, had singers, and some of the most fun was a group of sixth graders who joined us and had written memoirs about their experience. And so that got me thinking about a memoir. And I finally sat down and wrote a memoir. It took me a while, but that one is now been published and is up for sale. And it's from Army regulations to a novel, a writer's journey. And it's telling the story of how I transitioned from the military to being a novelist and writing memoirs with a few problems in between. And it's been really a great article, a great memoir. So it's been busy right now. I'm so delighted that we're going to be introducing the Zoom, the Twins cover today, because we've worked together hard on it with the editing and rewriting and all the things that go in with it. And so what I'd like to do now is to just kind of tell you a little bit about the thought process that I go into in trying to write a novel. First of all, you've got to research. You've got a lot of information that you need to gather, things you need to do. And unfortunately, Pennsylvania is really a home for a lot of these militias. And so I did a lot of research on that. And of course, then the unfortunate January 6th activity came up. No, I don't want to get into politics at all. It's just seeing what had happened, how the militias were able to do some of the things that they did. Really was quite a deal to watch. And then I think in my research, I saw an article that was written by our Attorney General, Garland Mern. And he said that, and believe it or not, back in the worst, in terrorist attack that we had, extremist, internal, was back in Oklahoma City. And that was back where 168 people died in that explosion that was set by Timothy McVeigh, who was mad about what had happened to some of the members of various militia movements. And they actually destroyed over 300 buildings, and a 16-mile radius there was damage. And then I began to wonder, you know, thriller writers always begin to think, what if? You know, could that happen again? Maybe. You know, we've got these extremist groups and they're a rising threat. FBI will tell you that. There's groups that are telling you that. And so the anti-government militias can be targeting law enforcement and can be targeting government buildings to protest what happens. There's one group that very big here in Pennsylvania. It's called the Oath Keepers. And they met here in one of our little towns in central Pennsylvania to plan this attack on the Capitol. And the Oath Keepers keep government, believe the government's been co-opted by elites. And I again, don't want to take one side or another. It's what I'm interested in is this a real threat? Could something dangerous really happen? And how do we stop extremists. So as a thriller writer, I began to think, what if militias can get together with white supremacists and can form alliances, and maybe form alliances with outside groups, maybe groups from other countries. And that gets into the story of twins. And I think that's what I'd like to share. So I thought long and hard about how to start Twins. Twins is my 8th thriller, and it never gets any easier. It's always hard because you know your readers are depending on you to tell them a good story. They want to pick up a book and they want to kind of get lost in it. And so how do they get it? How do you catch your reader? And you don't want to let them go. So it's still work on getting a very variety of plot lines. So at the beginning of the novel, you want to say, who is your main character? And introduce the situation. And then have you, and this is critical, have you given your readers a character who's worth following? Then you need to develop challenges for that character to establish the stakes. And each book has got to have high stakes if you're going to interest your reader and bring them in. For example, in Missing, which was my last suspense novel, the presidential election. People were trying to steal the election and look like they might be partially successful. Now, I'm fortunate with my lead character. I've been working for quite a while with Colonel Zack Kelly. Zack's an Army Ranger. He heads a team that supports the president's national security advisor. And his job is to help cut through the bureaucracy and help the national security advisor do his job. I can tell you from my time in the Pentagon, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy in the Washington. And what you want to do, Zack is a good, strong character. He's been in the Army about 18 years. He's got a lot of experience. He's an airborne ranger. He's been to 4 short tours. So he knows his way around the Army. But you can't have somebody who's a Superman. You know, people want a character who's real, that they can feel and they can relate to. So Zack, unfortunately, has developed through his tours in Afghanistan and 1 tour in Iraq, a moderate case of post-traumatic stress disorder that he is being treated for, but he's able to manage that and continue to do his job. The other thing, to try to make him more realistic and not just this Superman, is his divorced, and his ex-wife ended up in jail. She got depressed, started taking drugs, started selling them. So she's in jail for 2 years, and Zack's 18-year-old daughter comes to live with him as a single parent. And you can all, I don't know how many of you out there have, I've been blessed with 3 wonderful daughters. And most people have had daughters, and they are wonderful, but they're a challenge. And Zack all of a sudden now begins to realize that as he's out saving the world and got all these things to do through his job at the Pentagon, his phone rings. Dad, I thought you were coming in this afternoon to help coach my soccer team. And all of a sudden, Zack has a kind of a split personality. And then he's got to care for that. He's got all these responsibilities, and most of us know what that's like. So we can relate to Zack. And that's what makes him, I think, a really good character. And Zack works with a team on the president's national security advisor. And it helps me shift from one character to another. And you'll notice that some of the members of the team end up, well, one thing is going on in one place, another team members in another place. And that's how we can shift from one plot line to another. And I develop a bio sheet for each of my characters because they all have to have strengths as well as weaknesses. For example, his team member is Lieutenant Colonel Renee Garcia. She's been in the Army about 37 years. She's Hispanic. She's a Phi Beta Kappa, and she's a black belt in karate, and loves her Harley. But she constantly has it dragging on her. Her dad is a professor at the University of Texas, where she went to school. And he wanted her to stay there. Doesn't want her running around the Army. It's not the appropriate thing for a young lady to do. But that's what Garcia wants to do. So she's got to try to live with that. And many of us have those sorts of things that happen to us where our parents are not particularly happy with what we're doing. And the other member of the team that's going to be involved is Tara Fairchild. She was with the FBI and then with the Secret Service, and ended up getting a lot of sexual harassment threats because she's a beautiful young woman, and she got fed up with that. And so she's joined the president's national security advisor and is one of Zack's teammates. So that gives you an idea. And Zack's boss is a full Navy admiral, Admiral Steele, and he's been the national security advisor for 2 years. But you know, he's getting kind of tired of all the politics and all the stuff. So he's beginning to think, boy, it'd be nice if I could get out and get on the fleet as well. So now we've talked a little bit about some of the characters that are in the book. What I'd like to do is just take a minute and read the opening chapter of Twins, which kind of gives you a feeling for what's going on. But before I do that, I think what I'll do is read the back of every book always has a blurb, which tells you what the book is about. So this is the blurb that's on the back of Twins. A member of a Patriot's militia sets fire to a library in central Pennsylvania and kills a sheriff who tries to stop him. French operatives infiltrate the United States from Canada to hack into national computer systems, then use their skills to spread disinformation. Is there a relationship between these two events? The president's national security advisor dispatches Colonel Zack Kelly and a small team to evaluate the possibility of a terrorist threat. What they uncover is a bombing plot that's worse than the 1995 disaster in Oklahoma City, which killed 168 people. And the question for the reader is, can Zack and his team stop that nightmare before it's too late? So let me just start. I've kind of pulled back the curtain to let you see a little more about Twins. And now let me just read, it won't take a few minutes to read the first chapter, so you kind of know where we're going. Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, June 1st, 10:30 a.m. Everett Kenzo glanced up at the 3-story library building. He looked at the ornate design and the white pillars, knowing this would be the last time. Taking a deep breath, he glanced over at his partner, who had pulled in the driveway on the side of the library. Kenzo could hear the gentle purring of the engineer. He walked up the 3 steps, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. Glancing around the lobby, he found himself face to face with one of the assistant librarians who said, "May I help you?" He fondled a .45 caliber pistol in the right-hand pocket of his jacket, took another deep breath, pulled it out, and waved it in the air. "Put your hands up, lady." She spotted the pistol. Her eyes widened and she screamed. The pistol was heavy, but he loved the feel of it, and he loved the power radiated through him. From now on, people would always respect him. He was the lead element of the Patriots militia, and all of these fools would remember him. Members of the militia had taken enough. The burdens in government were going to fix it, and he'd start right now. Kenzo knew the only way to win the country back was to fight the enemy, those who were rich and took everything. They sweep into vultures like vultures. He stormed up to the desk to face the librarian, shoulder back, head high. She looked surprised to see his mask. He laughed. That's right. Now you will notice me. Put your hands in the air and tell everybody else in the room to do the same, and do it now. All right, all right. Please, please don't shoot. She called out in a very shaky voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please, please give me attention. This young man has asked us to put our hands in the air. Bitch, don't disrespect me by calling me a young man. Don't say I asked you to do it. I demand you do it, and you do it fast or I'll shoot. He waved the pistol for emphasis. I represent the Patriots, and you will respect me. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everyone, put your hands in the air. That's better. I have a bottle of gasoline in my pocket. He pointed to the left side. I want you to pour gasoline on the books in the back room and set fire to them. Together, we will destroy the lies and all the other garbage the government machine cranks out. What? Set fire to the book? We can't do that. He fired, this time to the immediate left of the librarian's head. You argue with me once more and I will shoot. He watched her shake. Now do what I say. We need to burn all the government material in the library. Yes, whatever you say. Only please, please don't shoot me. She took the bottle from him, hurried down to the large room and threw it around on the books. Oh, please don't do that, she said. He fired, this time hitting her in the shoulder. You must follow my orders without question. She fell to the floor crying and grabbed at her shoulder. Two women on the other side of the room yelled. He took the book of matches, lit one, and threw it on the gasoline, causing it to burst into flame. Now you must believe me. We will start by burning all these books. At that moment, a voice from the door called out, drop the gun. Everett turned to see the sheriff eyeing him. A pistol pointed his way. The sheriff moved toward his left. Now drop it before this gets any worse. Who do you think you are? Everett said. I have started our campaign. Others will follow. He pretended to set the gun on the floor, then raised his hand and fired. He fired another shot in the air. Everyone on the floor now. He watched with satisfaction as they all complied. Then he heard sirens. Knew he had to leave, took the remainder of the bottle of gasoline and threw it on the fire, causing it to whoosh. The sheriff lay there, unable to move. The sirens got closer. Kenzo turned and hurried out the door to where his friend sat idling. When he reached it, he opened the door. Go, go. The driver flashed a thumbs up, hit the accelerator. Kenzo looked back, saw the flames. People will talk about this forever. With a screech of wheels, they roared out of the parking lot and turned right on Main Street, away from the approaching fire trucks. So what we've done now is we've had an incident, and this is to catch people's attention. And you'll see that as we follow through, this is a plot line. This is this militia, and they need to figure out what's going on. So Kenzo in the Wellsboro Library. Now, usually a book starts out where the hero is kind of in a status situation. He's not hit with anything too big, too fast. So let's hear a little bit about what Zack is up to. This is chapter 2. Zack Kelly, stood along the field George Washington University used for soccer practice. He loved to watch his daughter, Laura, punch the ball up the field during a scrimmage game near Georgetown, and he loved yelling for her. Laura had come to live with him in D.C. a little over 2 years ago when his wife had been arrested and jailed. Now Laura was a sophomore and one of the starting wings on the team. Zack snuck over as often as he could to watch a little before hitting work at the Pentagon, and how he loved it. Fortunately, his boss, Admiral Steele, the president's national security advisor, was a sports fan and had even managed to sandwich in enough time to watch a couple of the games himself. Zack glanced at his watch, knowing full well he needed to move on. Oh, he hated to leave. He had been assistant coach during her senior year in high school. Never had played soccer, but as a former high school football coach, he'd been able to teach her a few lessons. And in addition to being very proud of her, the scholarship sure helped his billfold. Well, he was already pushing his luck. The admiral wanted a meeting at 10 o'clock and said it was really important. So Zack headed for his truck. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've opened up with a shooting at the library in Wellsboro, which is kind of north central Pennsylvania. Now we've got Zack heading into for a meeting with the president's national security advisor. So the next chapter, we're going to skip to the White House National Security Advisor's office and meet some of the team that will go to work and begin to have to deal with the incident. Zack hurried into his office about 9:30. Admiral Steele had called that meeting as an emergency meeting, and Zack knew when the president's national security advisor called, he better haul. He dropped a bag on his desk, grabbed a cup of coffee, and hurried down the hall, checking his watch. 9:45. Whew, he made it. When Zack entered the conference room, he spotted two of his partners, Lieutenant Colonel Rene Garcia and Tara Fairchild. Garcia was a military police officer who'd been on the job with him for about 18 months. Tara had come about a year ago after 9 years with the FBI. Admiral Steele came into the room and Zack called attention. Steele pointed at the two in civilian clothes. Let me introduce Colonel Oliver Hendricks and Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Darcy. Both of these officers are from Canada's National Law Enforcement Series of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Hendrick nodded to Zack. Thank you, Admiral. We sincerely appreciate your time. Steele picked up a sheet of paper from in front of him. According to the White House Chief of Staff, the Canadian Embassy has asked us to review the issue you are bringing to the table. He motioned toward Hendricks. Why don't you introduce your subject? Hendricks leaned forward in his chair. In the way of background, you may remember it's been a little over 25 years since the Oklahoma City's bombing. He glanced around the table for emphasis. This was a truck bombing of the Alfred Merrill Federal Building in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995, which killed 168 people. Zack had a bad feeling about this. Holy crap. Are you saying we might have another one of these bombings threatening us? Hendricks nodded. Admiral, the bombing in Oklahoma City was perpetrated by anti-government extremists, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. Steele nodded. We believe French separatists in Quebec may be working with extremist groups in the United States, and perhaps even individuals overseas in France to once again bomb targets in both the U.S. as well as Canada. Hendricks nodded to Colonel Darcy. Gabriella? Darcy walked to the front of the room. First, a short background on the French minority in Canada. Zack was surprised how she managed to catch his eye. Her blue eyes and black hair were a captivating combination. A very attractive woman with a winning smile. In 1867, Darcy began, Quebec joined Canada's English-speaking provinces in forming Canada. Over the next century, many French Canadians feared they were losing not only their unique culture, but their language as well. She took another sip of coffee. In 1995, by 50.6% to 49.4%, citizens of Quebec voted to remain in Canada, frustrating many of the more radicalized French. Wow, a close vote, Steele said. Most of these groups use negotiation to express their frustrations, although there are fringe groups that have used much more violent means. Today, these groups appear to be gaining power from the successes they witnessed extremist groups in the United States. Zack stood. Well, thanks, Colonel Darcy. Now I'd like to introduce Senior Agent Frank Harper to share what the FBI has on these groups. Harper said, Agent Steele, recently our focus has centered on the January 6th incident at the Capitol. Many of those involved are former law enforcement and military personnel. They hope to establish a network of activists to lay the groundwork for creation of state militias. Steele raised his eyebrows at the comment, but didn't say anything. During 2020, Harper continued, we tracked a total of 838 hate groups in the United States. These groups tend to spread out over the entire country, although there are two states which have the largest numbers, Pennsylvania and Alabama. Have you seen changes in these groups? Steele asked. Well, historically, these groups have been predominantly hateful against certain groups of people, Harper replied. They now seem to be gathering younger members who talk about building a fascist state. This is probably where this young man in Wellsboro was coming from. What can you tell me about the incident in Wellsboro? Steele asked. Well, the young man who shot the librarian also set the books on fire. Said he wanted to destroy books with government propaganda. Fortunately, the librarian was only shot in the shoulder and will recover. The sheriff who arrived on the scene was shot and killed by this man. Zack snapped his fingers. We need to interview this guy and find out what makes him tick. Harper shook his head. The killer had a vehicle waiting for him in the driveway next to the library. We found the vehicle abandoned on a country road about 5 miles away. Any leads at all? Harper paused for a sip of coffee. I wish, but we're worried fringe groups are gaining power again. Sir, Darcy joined in. Our undercover agents in Canada are hearing the same thing. They look at the attention groups have been receiving in the United States, and they want some of that attention, Steele said. What exactly do you think will happen? Hendricks pulled out a sheet of paper. We believe the most plausible scenario will be 2 explosions, one in the United States, probably DC, and one in Canada, probably Quebec. Timing, Zack asked. Last year was the 25th anniversary of the bombing in Oklahoma City, Hendricks replied. Because of the pandemic, it's very possible they decided not to do anything at that time. Zack jumped up. Which brings us to this year. We don't know for sure, Darcy said, but we see 3 possible time periods. Perhaps now, July 4th, or even December 7th. We're adding December 7th because the Pearl Harbor attack, because of the idea of a surprise attack. Steele folded his hands, which Zack knew was the signal he was overloaded with data and needed a plan. Zack stood. Sir, here's our first draft thoughts. We're going to send 2 or 3 of our staff to Montreal to make a presentation at McGill University, an English-speaking college in the middle of French-speaking Montreal. Why there? We would like to use that as a front until we can figure out what might happen there. The other team will be sent to somewhere in north central Pennsylvania because of the attack on Wellsboro. The feeling by FBI agents is Pennsylvania could be ground zero for these militia groups. When do you propose moving out? Steele asked. Zack looked around the table to see nodding heads. It seems to me it needs to be right away. If this threat is real, we can't wait a moment. Steele moved toward the door. Give me details by the end of the day. So now we've seen where we have a plot growing here with the militia groups shooting and burning all the library. Then we've got another plot with the French in Quebec, and maybe even overseas French who are going to be joining the group. So we seem to see a number of plot lines. What I'd like to do is just give you a little feeling for who Zack and his team might be facing. While Zack, Garcia, and Fairchild were meeting with the 2 Canadian officers, 2 faculty members from McGill University were meeting for coffee at the Humble Lion, a coffee shop a short walk from the college in Montreal. Bridget Manon, a tall, willowy blonde, and Andre Colbert, a heavy-set, dark-haired man with thick, round glasses, were leaning in close to each other, whispering in French, so as not to be overheard or understood by many of the English-speaking customers. I understand you attended a conference call yesterday, Manon said. I couldn't make it without tipping off my husband, and you know he can be such a bastard if he thinks I'm running around on him, which of course I am. She touched his hand. With you. Colbert glanced around and leaned a little closer. We believe we can make it happen before July 4th. Manon sipped her coffee, and took a bite of beignet to cover her surprise. Does that give us enough time, Cherie? It's pretty close considering all the coordination we require, particularly internationally. You're right, I didn't like it, so I sent a note overseas and expect a response shortly. They'll be the ones to put a stop to it if need be. I can't help but think we'll need to push it back several days in order to have the right people in place. I'm sure we'll need more time. Relax, we can stop it with help from our friends in France. What I'm worried most about is the recent congressional hearings in D.C. Manon glanced up, a questioning look in her eye. Why? What does that have to do with anything? What we're trying to do? The United States Attorney General briefed a joint committee about the dangers of domestic terrorism and asked for more money to help prevent it. Manon sneered. I don't understand why that's a problem. The White House staff is always asking for money. Would you believe the Attorney General himself was the one to lead the investigation into the 1995 attack on the Merrill Federal Building in Oklahoma City? Manon's eyes widened in surprise. Are you telling me he was there? He personally saw what can happen? He's going to be driven by it. If he gets involved, it can make it much more difficult for us to surprise the 2 governments. Colbert glanced around and then he leaned forward. If we're going to pull off a repeat performance They can't be ready for it. Manon took a sip of her coffee. The president's staff is setting up their investigation into terrorism. I heard that since he came into office, they've arrested more than 400 people who were involved with that attack on the DC Capitol. He took a cup of coffee. I let it get cold. He stopped for a moment and looked off toward the kitchen. On the other hand, if we can pull it off, the Justice Department looks even worse. The Attorney General is a two-time loser, forever branded with death of hundreds of people. She smiled at him, reached under the table to touch his leg. I love the way you think. Makes me excited and wanting to get moving forward. He laughed. Bridget, keep your excitement penned up until tomorrow night. Then I want you to release it, all of it. I can't wait, she laughed. How about now? Here, wouldn't that be exciting? Colbert bent over. Stop. So what we've done is we initially talked about the blurb, and we have French operatives infiltrate into the United States from Canada to hack into national computer systems, then use their skill to spread disinformation. So we have a plot line where we are dealing with people in Quebec. We have a plot line that involves people in France. We have a plot line that involves the militia groups. And as we begin to develop these plot lines, we'll see a switching back and forth of how we have to put all this together. So remember, I think what if we're thinking about is that if French operatives hack into our system, Facebook and the press, and spread their messages through those two, will other things happen to confuse people, and people will not know what's going on. So what I've tried to do is to bring you in to the first part of the story about twins, so you have a better understanding of what of the number of things. Because when we give you a blurb, you just get the kind of put your toe in the water. But this helps you understand that these are real people, real situations that are going to be brought alive. And Zack and his team are going to be faced with deadly people from these militia groups and very bright people from Quebec and France. And they're going to have to stop it and try to bring it under control. Okay, Kathy, I think that's probably enough. Maybe we have some questions.
Don, we do. This is a riveting new novel. We have a couple questions. One is, how do you develop your series characters? I know the questioner was going from, is it harder to write a series with continuing characters than it would be a standalone story?
Well, I may have mentioned to you, but when I was first getting into writing suspense novels, I was a member of International Thrill Writers, and they have what's called a debut group, which are new writers, and it's like kind of a pledge class. There were 19 of us in this pledge class, and one of our mentors develops series characters. Jack Reacher, I'm sure that name is probably familiar to you. And Lee worked with us to try to help us. And I really got captivated by his point, is that you get these characters and they become part of you. And I have found that my readers really like some of these characters. For example, in my first book, there was a young woman who was from Ireland, and she was a mystic, and she helped Zack solve the problem. And I had a couple of people ask me, when's Shaylee going to come back? I thought she was really a good character. And sure enough, she showed up in number 4. So I think what I like is building the character. And once you put your pluses and minuses on him, he becomes real to you. You know, Zack is an Army colonel. He works in the Pentagon. He's got a daughter and he's a single parent. I can relate to that. You know, he's got a problem with post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of my friends have very serious things. So you can kind of get inside him and realize how he thinks. But I think most importantly, I have found that people will come up to me and say, well, what's Zack up to now? I say, well, who knows? You just have to keep waiting until the next one's ready. So I think it's good, and a lot of people do well with individual characters. But for me, right now, I like working with Zack.
Well, he's a memorable character, that's for sure. We have another question. What kind of research do you do for your novels? Do you travel to these locations so you can feel what the character's feeling?
I think it's important to go to places, and that's what I've tried to do. Elaine and I have spent time in Quebec. We've been to the college there. We've been to these coffee shops. And what I try to do is I walk around and take notes. For example, my 5th book was on Tibet. And I've got 3 packages of notes on what do people eat? What's it like to walk into a restaurant? When we did a story in New York, I actually went to the restaurants that Zack went to, and because if you don't do that, and then people know that, then they question it. If your setting, I have found, if your setting is valid and people don't have any questions about that and they think you've developed that, then they accept everything else. Even though it's fiction, they accept it. But if the setting doesn't make any sense to them, then you're off to a slow start. So in addition to the internet, libraries, we've got a wonderful library here, and I'm already doing a lot of research on the next one, because it takes me about a year to get it all together. So research is critical.
Yes, indeed. I ask all the authors this question. We don't have any more questions from the viewers. Don, what is your most memorable book moment?
Oh my. I would have to say, I think Tibet, you know, that was such an exciting place, because we had an opportunity to meet some of the senior religious leaders. And, you know, it's too bad, and it's a shame the way the Tibetan people have really been pushed under the boot of the Chinese. And so you can really feel that, you know, and we were in Tibet, Bhutan, and Nepal. And actually, when we were in Nepal, one of our friends had a sister who'd gotten to know one of the senior priests, and he'd been the head of the library in Nepal, the state library. And her sister had died, and she wrote and asked if he would be willing, while she was there, to provide a funeral ceremony for her sister. And he agreed. And we had gotten to know her really well. And she asked Elaine and I to join them. And on the morning, we were standing by a river, and the senior priest had taken her ashes and wrapped them up in yellow paper, put a little ribbon around them, and he prayed over them. And then about every 3 or 4 minutes, he would put one of these little packages in the water. And it was about 30 feet down before they disappeared around the corner. And we would watch as one disappeared, and we watched as another one disappeared. And I think that's a moment we were just lucky to participate in, and certainly one I will never forget.
Most definitely. I can't imagine. That was a very special one, once in a lifetime event. Dawn, we let people know that your cover reveal was today for Twins.
Oh,
I'd like to let people know that they can pre-order the book on headlinebooks.com.
okay.
Don will have it up on his website for pre-order. And of course, it'll be on Amazon. We anticipate a May release for this book. So you've really given us a great teaser for this book too. That's great. I know it'll be good. We all like Zack Kelly. Zoom Into Books also has started a new ebook site. There's a link on headlinebooks.com for that and on zoomintobooks.com. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. This video of Dawn will be on our Facebook page. You can watch it anytime, and it will be up on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So Dawn, I want to thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you in Philadelphia this month.
Absolutely. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes.
We'll be talking about Zoom in the Books a lot, I believe.
Yes, we will. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I hope you all have a great week. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Thanks, Kathy.